Every year during Hallow's End, players hunt down the Headless Horseman for a shot at one of the rarest mounts in World of Warcraft. But nobody talks about who this guy actually was before he lost his head. Sir Thomas Thompson started as one of the most respected paladins in Azeroth, and his fall into madness is way darker than you think. Today I'm breaking down the complete story of the Headless Horseman, from his origins as a Knight of the Silver Hand to the cursed encounter that's been running for 17 years straight, starting with the tragedy that created him. Thomas Thompson's descent. Sir Thomas Thompson was a Knight of the Silver Hand, not just any knight either. He was revered among his fellow paladins, the kind of hero other heroes looked up to. He represented everything a paladin should be: righteous, powerful, dedicated to the light. His reputation extended beyond just combat prowess. This was someone who embodied the very ideals the Silver Hand was founded on, the type of figure who inspired recruits and commanded respect from veterans. But something happened inside the Scarlet Monastery that broke him completely. He became cursed, driven insane within those walls, and his mind fractured so badly that he couldn't recognize reality anymore. Here's where it gets weird. The curse doesn't just make him undead, it twists his perception so violently that he can't distinguish between the living and the dead anymore. When you fight him, you're not battling a monster who knows what he's become. You're fighting a man whose mind has been shattered by whatever dark magic corrupted him. He sees the world through a distorted lens where friends and enemies blur together, where his own damnation is invisible to him. That's the cruelest part of the curse, not the physical transformation, but the psychological prison that leaves him trapped in confusion and madness, unable to see his own damnation. The transformation didn't just take his head, it took his ability to understand what he lost. When you finally defeat him during the encounter, his true identity gets revealed. The game specifically identifies him as Sir Thomas Thompson, suggesting some fragment of the original knight still exists somewhere inside that cursed form. That name drop isn't accidental. Blizzard deliberately left the complete details vague. We don't know exactly how he got cursed, what specific event triggered his transformation, or whether any part of the hero he used to be can still be saved. We don't know if he's aware of what he does every Hallow's End, or if each year's rampage is just another endless loop in his fractured mind. That mystery has kept players theorizing for almost 2 decades, turning a holiday boss into a legitimate tragic figure. The Headless Horseman concept itself pulls directly from Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and the broader European folklore tradition of headless riders that goes back centuries. Blizzard took that archetype and grounded it specifically in Warcraft lore by making him Sir Thomas Thompson, rather than just importing a generic Halloween monster. The developers added the actual boss encounter in 2007, 2 years after Hallow's End first launched in 2005. Before that, the holiday existed but didn't have this centerpiece boss fight that would become its defining feature. The encounter became so popular that it's remained virtually unchanged for 17 years, a testament to how well the tragic backstory resonates with players beyond just the loot chase. Community theories about exactly what happened to Thomas Thompson are all over the place. Some players think he got corrupted by necromantic forces operating inside the Scarlet Monastery. Others believe darker magical experimentation or deliberate betrayal caused his fall. A few theories even suggest he was intentionally sacrificed or transformed as part of some Scarlet Crusade ritual gone wrong, which would add another layer of betrayal considering he served the light faithfully. The thin canonical details just make people dig deeper, turning him into one of the most discussed lore figures in holiday content. Players still debate whether he can be redeemed if the curse is permanent, or if what we're fighting is just just an echo of the man rather than the man himself. Some have even suggested that defeating him each year might be an act of mercy, giving him brief moments of release from his torment. But if you think his backstory is disturbing, wait until you see how his curse manifests across Azeroth during the actual holiday event. The Shade of the Horseman. The Headless Horseman doesn't just wait politely in his dungeon for players to show up. Every Hallow's End, his curse manifests across Azeroth in the form of the Shade of the Horseman, a spectral terror that specifically targets 6 villages: Karanos in Dunmarok, Goldshire in Elwyn Forest, Azure Watch on Azure Mist Isle, Razor Hill in Duratar, Brill in Tirisfal Glades, Falconwing Square in Eversong Woods. 3 Alliance, 3 Horde, perfectly balanced attacks that show this isn't random chaos, but a coordinated supernatural siege. The symmetry is deliberate. The Horseman isn't playing favorites. He's methodically terrorizing both factions simultaneously, turning the entire contested world into his personal haunting ground. Here's how the attacks work. The Shade circles overhead on a flying mount, launching flaming pumpkins at structures below. Buildings catch fire, structures burn, and if players do nothing, the entire settlement gets torched. So there's this frantic firefighting phase where you're running around with water buckets, extinguishing flames before they consume everything. The buckets themselves spawn at designated water sources throughout each village, and you have to physically run between the bucket spawn and the burning buildings, creating this emergent coordination where random strangers are tackling different fires simultaneously. Only after you've saved the village and doused the last fire does the Shade actually descend to engage in direct combat. It's atmospheric, it creates urgency across the entire game world, and it makes Hallow's End feel like an actual invasion rather than just queue for dungeon content. You're not instancing into a self-contained holiday activity. The holiday is happening to the world around you whether you participate or not. Now here's the accessibility angle. The Shade is classified as a non-elite level 11 creature. That means any character past the starting zones can participate. You don't need endgame gear, you don't need raid experience, you don't even need friends. When the Shade appears, random players just converge, extinguish fires together, burn down the Shade, and everyone gets a pumpkin. It's genuinely inclusive design that lets brand new players participate in holiday content alongside veterans who've been playing for 15 years. There's no gear check, there's no item level requirement, there's no complex rotation you need to master. You grab a bucket, you throw water at fire, you hit the floating ghost horseman with your abilities, and you get rewarded. The low barrier to entry means these encounters frequently turn into spontaneous community moments where dozens of players from different guilds, different levels, and different progression tiers are all working toward the same immediate goal. But here's where it gets strategic. Defeating the Shade leaves a pumpkin on the ground that you can interact with, and that pumpkin advances the quest chain toward the main boss encounter. The Shade functions as both an introduction and a prerequisite. It teaches you that the Headless Horseman exists, it shows you the flaming pumpkin mechanics you'll see again in the dungeon, and it hands you a quest that literally says go to Scarlet Monastery and finish this. It's a teaching encounter that bridges the gap between world content and instance group content. Blizzard uses this as an onboarding ramp. Fight the Shade first, learn the basic concepts, then graduate to the real encounter where those same mechanics appear in a more challenging context. The progression feels natural rather than gatekeepy. Community debates around the Shade focus on 2 things. First, the difficulty tuning. Veteran players find it trivially easy and view the Shade as a boring prerequisite rather than meaningful content. You can literally solo kill it on any max level character in under 10 seconds, which makes the entire event feel like a formality rather than a challenge. New players appreciate the accessibility, but sometimes wish the encounter felt more challenging or rewarding. The loot from the shade itself is minimal. You get quest credit and that's basically it. Second, the random timing. The shade attacks at unpredictable intervals throughout Hallow's End. Some players love this because it creates spontaneous world events where you're just minding your business and suddenly there's a spectral horseman burning down Goldshire. Others find it frustrating because you can't reliably plan around it, and if you're specifically trying to farm shade kills for quest completion, you're stuck waiting for random spawns. There's no predictable schedule, no announcement system, no way to know when the next attack wave is coming. You either happen to be in the right place at the right time, or you camp one of the 6 villages and hope. But if you think flaming pumpkins raining on villages is bad, wait until you see where the Headless Horseman actually lives. The Scarlet Monastery Graveyard. The Headless Horseman doesn't just appear, you have to go to him. And the place you're heading is one of the most atmospherically perfect boss arenas Blizzard has ever designed. The Scarlet Monastery Graveyard sits in Tirisfal Glades, officially called the Forlorn Cloister, and it was originally a level 28 to 33 dungeon back when that actually meant something. This was sacred ground once, a place of prayer and remembrance before the Scourge turned it into yet another monument to death and corruption. Wraiths drift between crumbling headstones, zombies shuffle through the mist. Skeletal guards patrol the perimeter with rusty weapons that haven't been maintained in years but still function perfectly well for killing adventurers. Architecture itself tells the story, stone monuments slowly crumbling under the weight of neglect and dark magic, moss growing over inscriptions that nobody's read in decades. The whole place feels like it's waiting for something terrible to happen. At the center of the cloister stands the pumpkin shrine. It's impossible to miss. Giant carved pumpkin, flickering candles, the works. This is where you light the candle and summon the horseman. Behind the shrine sits a ruined tomb, half-collapsed stone that doesn't look important until the fight ends. That's when a ghostly orb emerges from the horseman's corpse and floats straight into that tomb, revealing the spirit of Sir Thomas finally at rest. It's a small visual detail that most players probably miss in the chaos of looting, but it's perfect environmental storytelling. The designers didn't need to spell out what happened, and they just showed you the moment of redemption and trusted you to understand. Here's where it gets interesting from a design perspective. Originally, fighting the Headless Horseman meant clearing the entire Scarlet Monastery dungeon every single time you wanted another attempt. You'd run through the graveyard, kill everything in your path, reach the shrine, fight the boss, then do it all over again if you wanted another shot at the loot. Every single time. It was tedious, it was time consuming, and for players farming that mount with its 1% drop rate, it was absolutely miserable. You could spend literal hours just running back and forth through the same corridor, killing the same zombies for the privilege of a 30-second boss fight. Blizzard eventually realized this was terrible game design and implemented an instance version accessible through the Dungeon Finder. Now you queue up, get teleported directly to a special seasonal version of the graveyard, and fight the horseman without clearing trash. The encounter exists in its own pocket dimension, separate from the standard dungeon. You're not actually in the real Scarlet Monastery graveyard anymore. You're in a Halloween party version of it that only exists during Hallow's End. Same aesthetics, same layout, but fundamentally disconnected from the physical world space. It's theme park design at its purest, a ride you can queue for without walking through the rest of the park. The instance maintains a hard cap of 5 players. This is deliberate. The encounter was balanced around a 5-person group, and Blizzard wasn't about to let raid groups of 20 or 30 people overwhelm the mechanics through sheer numerical advantage. You get 5 people maximum, which means you can't just throw bodies at the problem. You have to actually execute the fight properly. No carrying your 40 undergeared guildmates through for easy loot. If you want the mount, you're doing it the intended way. There's something genuinely nostalgic about returning to the Scarlet Monastery during Hallow's End if you played during Vanilla or Burning Crusade. This place used to be legitimately dangerous. Groups wiped here, healers ran out of mana, tanks couldn't hold threat. On multiple pulls, warriors would accidentally pull extra packs and the whole run would collapse into chaos. Priests would fade aggro onto themselves and get dogpiled by 4 mobs at once. Mages would sheep the wrong target and get kicked from the group. It was rough. Now you can solo it at max level without breaking a sweat, one-shotting enemies that used to require careful crowd control control and precise timing. But during Hallow's End, when you're fighting the Horseman with a proper group again, when you actually need a tank and a healer in coordination, it almost feels like old times, almost. But none of that atmosphere matters if you can't survive the actual fight, which is where things get complicated. Because the Horseman doesn't just stand there and let you hit him, he's got 3 distinct phases, and each one will absolutely destroy you if you don't know what's coming. The 3 phases of the boss fight. The Headless Horseman fight isn't just hit the boss until he dies. It's 3 entirely different encounters stacked on top of each other, each one testing something different, and if you mess up any of them, you're starting over. Phase 1 runs from full health down to 1%, and it's the simplest part of the encounter. The Horseman uses a cleave attack that hits for around 4,000 damage to plate armor, which means melee DPS need to position behind him or they're eating unnecessary damage. Tanks hold aggro, healers keep everyone alive, damage dealers burn. Standard dungeon stuff, but here's where it gets weird. At 1% health, the Horseman's head detaches from his body. Not metaphorically, his actual head flies off and becomes a separate targetable enemy. With 63,000 health, the body goes immune to damage and starts spinning around with a whirlwind attack that deals about 2,000 damage per second to anyone standing near it. This is phase 2, and it introduces the conflagration mechanic, a damage over time effect that randomly targets players and ticks for a percentage of their maximum health every second for about 5 seconds. You can remove it with PvP trinkets, Divine Shield, Ice Block, or similar abilities, but if you don't have those, you're taking the damage. The race condition in phase 2 is what makes it stressful. You have to kill the head before the body heals back to full. If the body reaches 100% health, the head reattaches and you're back in phase 1. The head deals 0 damage, so every single DPS can unload everything they have without worrying about threat or incoming attacks. The problem is targeting. When the head detaches, it becomes a separate entity in a crowd of visual effects, and clicking on it manually wastes seconds you don't have. Players use the macro/target exact head of the Horseman to instantly acquire the correct target the moment it separates. Those few seconds matter. Groups with insufficient DPS find themselves looping between phase 1 and phase 2 indefinitely, never progressing because they can't burn the head fast enough before the body heals. Phase 3 begins when the head dies or when you push it to 30% health, depending on which happens first. The head reattaches, conflagration stops, and the Horseman enters his final form. No more random fire debuffs. Instead, every 30 seconds he throws 4 pulsing pumpkins onto the ground. Each pumpkin has 10,000 health. After 15 seconds, they mature into pumpkin fiends. Each matured fiend has 10,000 health, deals 650 base damage, and most importantly, grants the Horseman a complete heal if it reaches full maturity. Let me repeat that. Every single pumpkin that matures heals the boss to full health. If you let 4 pumpkins mature in a single wave, the boss heals 4 times, and you've effectively lost the encounter. The entire phase becomes a race between destroying spawns and burning the boss before the spawns overwhelm you. Some groups focus exclusively on pumpkin control, using area of effect abilities to nuke each wave the moment it lands. Other groups split their damage, with some players handling adds while others continue attacking the Horseman directly. The optimal strategy involves tanking the Horseman near the steps leading down into the graveyard, because all the pumpkin spawns land close together when positioned there, making AoE destruction significantly easier. Different group compositions struggle with different phases. Melee-heavy groups hate phase 2 because conflagration punishes stacking, and they can't escape the damage over time effect as easily as ranged players. Groups lacking burst damage struggle in phase 3 because they can't destroy pumpkins fast enough before they mature and grant heals. Undergeared tanks sometimes struggle in phase 1 simply from the consistent cleave damage output. The encounter stretches coordination to its limits precisely because it demands 3 different skill sets across 3 distinct phases rather than allowing groups to execute a single repeatable pattern. The visual metaphor of the head separation represents the supernatural nature of the curse itself. Sir Thomas Thompson isn't just a dead knight, he's a fragmented being, split between body and consciousness, existing in a state that defies natural death. When his head detaches during the encounter, players aren't just fighting a mechanical phase transition. They're experiencing a literal representation of his curse, watching his fractured existence manifest as separate entities that must be destroyed independently before they can reunite and heal. It's horror as gameplay mechanic. Phase 3 concludes when the Horseman horseman's health drops to approximately 1% for the final time. His head detaches one last time, and players must burn it down as quickly as possible. Once the head dies, the main body collapses, any remaining pulsing pumpkins instantly die, and the encounter ends. A loot-filled pumpkin appears on the ground, containing the rewards everyone spent the last several minutes fighting for. The mechanical complexity for seasonal content encountered once yearly creates an interesting problem. Players face this boss for maybe 2 weeks per year, meaning they have limited time to master the mechanics before Hallow's End ends, and they won't see the encounter again for another 50 weeks. Compare that to raid bosses that guilds practice for months, or dungeons that players run hundreds of times across an expansion. The Headless Horseman demands immediate competency with minimal practice time, and many groups wipe repeatedly during the first few days of Hallow's End each year simply because everyone's forgotten how the phases work, but at least you only have to master 3 phases, unlike the mount drop rate, which has defeated players for nearly 2 decades straight. The Horseman's Reigns. The Horseman's Reigns is either the most coveted mount in World of Warcraft or the cruelest joke Blizzard ever designed. And before you think that's hyperbole, hear me out. The drop rate sits at approximately 0.3 to 0.4%. That translates to roughly 1 drop per 250 to 300 attempts. Community data from 44,000 documented kills yielded exactly 139 mounts, confirming a 0.3% drop rate. Blizzard themselves stated the mount drops 10 times less frequently than the squashling pet, which means they designed this thing to be exceptionally rare on purpose, not accidentally rare, deliberately, mathematically designed to torment you rare. But here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't always the case. Originally, the Horseman's Reigns had a drop rate of 1 in 5,000. 1 in 5,000, that's not a typo. Players during the 2008 Hallow's End event faced those odds and still showed up every single day. Patch 3.0.2 increased it to 1 in 100, which felt generous by comparison. Players celebrated like they'd won the lottery despite the fact that 1% still meant running the encounter daily for months with no guarantee. Then they adjusted it again to the current rate, settling somewhere between technically possible and good luck with that. The psychology of farming, a 0.3% drop rate, creates genuinely obsessive behavior. Players run the encounter daily across multiple characters for years, some obtain the mount on their first kill, others farm it for a decade and never see it drop once. The variance is so extreme that it breaks human intuition about probability. You can run this boss 500 times and statistically still have only a 78% chance of owning the mount, which means 1 in 5 players who hit 500 kills still walks away empty-handed. That's not a grind, that's psychological warfare. Each player receives 1 loot-filled pumpkin daily per character via the Dungeon Finder. That pumpkin contains the potential mount drop. You get 1 shot per character per day during the 2-week event. If you're running 10 characters, that's 140 attempts per year maximum. At 0.3%, you're looking at an average of 2 years of daily farming across 10 characters to see a single drop. And that's assuming perfect attendance. Miss 3 days and you've lost 30 attempts. Take a vacation during October and you might as well write off the entire year. The limited availability window amplifies the psychological pressure exponentially. Seasonal events create artificial scarcity that transforms casual players into obsessive farmers. You can't just decide to farm the Horseman's Reigns whenever you feel like it. You get 2 weeks per year. That's it. Miss the window and you're locked out for 12 months. This time, constraint creates a sense of urgency that keeps players logging in even when they're burned out, tired, or genuinely sick of the encounter. Because if you skip a day, that's a chance you'll never get back. Now, the mount itself justifies some of this obsession because mechanically it's genuinely superior to most mounts of its era. The Horseman's Reigns functions as a unique scaling mount that adapts to your riding skill level. With maximum training, it reaches 100% ground speed and 280% flying speed. But here's the kicker. It requires no epic flying training to function at full capacity. Unlike other epic mounts from the Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King, which demanded expensive skill upgrades to reach maximum speed, the Horseman's Reigns just works. You get epic speed travel without purchasing epic riding instruction. For players who hadn't invested thousands of gold into mount training, this was massive. You could be a fresh level 70 character with basic riding and still fly at maximum speed the moment you looted this mount. Beyond the mechanical advantage, the aesthetic appeal is undeniable. You ride as a headless figure on a flaming steed. The visual instantly communicates rarity and status. The flames trailing behind you aren't subtle. The headless rider animation isn't something people miss. When someone flies past you on the horseman's reins, you know exactly what they went through to get it, or you assume they got lucky on their first attempt and you hate them for it. Either way, the mount serves as a bragging rights symbol that transcends practical utility. Players who own it will fly circles around quest hubs just to show it off. Players who don't own it feel a mixture of envy and resentment every time they see one. The community stories surrounding this mount span the entire spectrum of statistical possibility. Players report obtaining multiple drops in a single season, while others document decade-long droughts with 0 successes despite running the encounter every single day. One player farmed it on 15 alts for 8 consecutive years before finally seeing a drop. Another obtained it 3 times in 1 week and couldn't trade or sell the duplicates. The randomness creates a community divided between the blessed and the cursed, and everyone remembers exactly where they were when their mount finally dropped. Or they remember the exact year they gave up trying. Some players treat the farm like a religious ritual. Same characters, same order, same time of day every single year. They document their attempts in spreadsheets, tracking kill counts and calculating probability curves that confirm what they already know. They're still unlucky. Others adopt a superstitious approach, convinced that running the encounter at specific times or on specific characters increases their odds. It doesn't. But desperation creates strange beliefs, but if you think mount farming defines player obsession, wait until you hear about the rhymes the horseman recites throughout the entire encounter. The Hallows End rhymes. The theatrical voice performance brings the character to life. And honestly, that performance is half the reason players remember this encounter at all, but it's not just that the voice actor sounds good, it's that every single line is written like someone handed Shakespeare a pumpkin and told him to make it terrifying. The horseman's opening declaration hits you the second you activate the pumpkin shrine. Prepare yourselves, the bells have tolled, shelter your weak, your young, and your old. Each of you shall pay the final sum. Cry for mercy, the reckoning has begun. That's not a boss entrance, that's Shakespeare deciding to crash your Halloween party and announce the apocalypse with perfect iambic meter. The language is deliberately archaic, overdramatic, and completely committed to the bit. It works because the voice actor doesn't wink at the camera. He plays it straight, like he's genuinely announcing the end of days, and that sincerity sells the entire encounter before you even start fighting. There's no ironic distance, no self-aware humor, just pure theatrical doom, delivered with the gravitas of a stage actor who believes every word. When you click the shrine to summon him, there's a call and response. Your character speaks first. Horseman rise, your time is nigh. You felt death once. Now, no demise. The horseman answers, it is over. Your search is done. Let fate choose now, the righteous one. The inversion is right there in the text. Your character speaks of resurrection and reckoning, commanding him to face justice. The horseman speaks of endings and chosen fates as if he's the one granting you an audience. He's responding to a completely different conversation than the one you're actually having, because in his mind, you're already dead. You're not the hero challenging the villain. You're the next victim stepping into his domain. This isn't flavor text, this is character psychology embedded in dialogue structure. The rhyme scheme makes it sound like an ancient ritual being spoken into existence, which reinforces the idea that this confrontation has happened countless times before and will happen countless times again. During Phase 3, when the pulsing pumpkins spawn, spectral voices cry out, "Soldiers arise, stand and fight. Bring victory at last to this fallen knight." That line does something genuinely disturbing. The horseman views his minions as loyal soldiers in an endless crusade. He's not summoning trash mobs to overwhelm you. He's rallying troops to his banner because somewhere in his fractured mind, Sir Thomas Thompson still believes he's the hero of this story. The language echoes medieval battlefield poetry, the kind of rallying cry a knight would give before a charge against impossible odds, except it's coming from animated pumpkins serving a headless corpse riding a flaming nightmare horse. The subversion is perfect. Fantasy heroics twisted into horror. The pumpkins aren't monsters, they're his army, and he's their commander, still fighting a war that ended centuries ago. If you die during the encounter, the horseman has a line specifically for that. Your body lies beaten, battered, and broken. Let my curse be your own. Fate has spoken. That's not a taunt, that's a transformation announcement. He's not killing you, he's converting you. The implication is that every death in his presence spreads the curse, dragging you into the the same inverted reality where he exists. It's genuinely unsettling, especially because the rhyme scheme makes it sound inevitable, like a fairy tale curse being spoken into existence by someone who has all the time in the world to watch it unfold. You don't just lose health, you become part of the cycle, another soul trapped in the loop. The rhyme makes it feel like a contract being sealed, which is significantly creepier than a generic "you have failed" death message. When defeated, the horseman doesn't rage or beg. He simply states, "This end have I reached before. What new adventure lies in store? Eternal cyclical resurrection condensed into 2 sentences. He's been killed before, he'll be killed again. The curse doesn't end." It just pauses until next Hallow's End, when the bells toll again and the whole thing starts over. That line reframes every defeat as temporary, suggesting the encounter you just completed was one iteration in an infinite loop stretching across years. He's not upset about dying, he's curious, mildly interested in what comes next, the same way someone might wonder what's for dinner, and death is just an intermission in his eternal existence. And the rhyme structure makes that resignation sound almost peaceful, which somehow makes it worse. The community appreciation for these lines has been consistent since 2007. Players create compilation videos of the voice acting. They quote the rhymes in chat during the event. Some players return every year specifically to hear the performance again, even if they don't need the loot anymore and have the mount sitting in their collection gathering digital dust. The theatrical voice acting transforms combat into a story-driven experience where every phase transition and major event gets announced with personality and gravitas. The rhymes reveal the horseman's inverted perception and psychology more effectively than any quest text or item description could, and critically, they make the encounter feel special. You're not just grinding a seasonal boss for a mount drop, you're participating in a theatrical production where the voice performance is on stage delivering medieval battlefield poetry while you dodge pumpkin fiends and try not to get trampled by a flaming horse. The lines are a major contributor to the horseman's beloved status beyond the mechanical challenge. Strip away the voice acting and rhymes, and you've got a 3-phased boss with ads that spawns once a day during a limited event. Keep them and you've got one of the most memorable encounters in World of Warcraft history, quoted and celebrated nearly 2 decades after its introduction. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.